It's day 3 of the House Speaker election, and Congressman Kevin McCarthy made new concessions overnight, hoping to secure the votes he needs. According to reports, he agreed to lower the number of members needed to bring forward a vote to remove the Speaker from 5 down to 1. He also agreed to put more members of the Freedom Caucus on the Rules Committee. That's a very powerful group that debates legislation before it's sent to the floor for a vote. Here to explain how the House can elect a speaker and get to work is former Congressman Reid Ribble of Wisconsin. Thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be with you. Thank you.
Now they've taken twice as many votes for Speaker in 3 days than you took in 6 years. Now, Kevin McCarthy is facing pressure from Republicans to figure this out, and we have video here of members-elect talking it over on the House floor yesterday. Now, you've been there. How do negotiations change when you're 3 days into something that urgently needs to get done?
There's nothing that's going to change. There are too many people that are completely locked in. I mean, we even had one congressman from North Carolina say yesterday that he's going to resign if Kevin McCarthy were to win. And so they're able, this very small majority of members are able to withhold that position from Kevin McCarthy, and that's looks like it's likely to be the result. There's nothing that Kevin can give them beyond what he's already offered that will move them to vote for him. I mean, Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert have already said they won't vote him under any circumstances. So I don't know why Kevin would be negotiating with them at all anymore. It's not likely to move anybody.
Now let's talk about this one-person motion to vacate, which would allow one single member of Congress, which is a body of 435 people, to bring forward a resolution to vote on it to remove the Speaker of the House. That's been described as untenable. But if it came to fruition, how would it work?
Well, it worked when I was there because Mark Meadows, who later became Chief of Staff to President Trump, filed a motion to vacate the chair against Speaker John Boehner, one person. And then what happens is there's a period of time, a cooling off period, that a negotiation takes place to see whether or not that privilege motion is actually going to go to the floor. Ultimately, that one member could force it to the floor. John Boehner resigned before that actually happened. But in essence, one person representing 700,000 American citizens, while the remaining 434 who represented 330 million, that one person was able to force that vote. I think it's a mistake for Kevin to give them that. I think that there ought to be a threshold of maybe 15 or 20% of the majority to have a motion to vacate the chair. But once you start negotiating with people who are not negotiating back with good faith, you've already lost the battle.
Now, the group that's doing all this, the Freedom Caucus, is in lockstep with each other, and they have 20 members. So what's the difference between a one-person motion to vacate or a 5-person motion to vacate if all 20 of these members are agreeing to stick together?
Well, there really is no difference, quite frankly. That's why I said it needed to be 20% of the majority. That would be a reasonable threshold to force a vote for the Speaker. Remember, though, that the Speaker does work for the members, and the members ought to have a reasonable mechanism which to remove the Speaker who's not doing the will of the majority. And we saw something similar last year or 2 years ago when they removed Liz Cheney as the conference chair. The conference decided she was no longer dealing in good faith or communicating the message that the conference wanted to communicate. And so there was a vehicle inside that majority with which to remove her. And what they're saying is they want the threshold of having a vote moved from about 75 or 80% of the membership down to one person. And I think that threshold is too low, but there ought to be a threshold. And not all the members of the Freedom Caucus are on board with this, by the way.
Yeah, we have a quote here from Representative-elect Derek Van Orden. He was a Republican from Wisconsin. He said a minority of our party has decided that they want to continue with this obstruction, and it's actually becoming detrimental to our nation. At what point does concern about public perception come into the equation for Republicans?
I think it's already happened, and it will only get worse if they can't move off of where they're at. And so ultimately, they're going to, I believe, they're going to have to find somebody else that the majority can support, whether it's Steve Scalise or even Congressman Mike Gallagher from up in Green Bay, who took over for me after I left, somebody that has a broader appeal to the base of the members. Listen, this has gotten personal. And so no matter what Kevin McCarthy offers to give them in the form of rules and process changes, which, by the way, many of them are reasonable, just to vacate the chair, I don't think is reasonable, but others are, they're still not going to vote for Kevin McCarthy. And so they need to come up with a different option. Clearly, it's not going to be somebody that just those 5 people select, but it's going to require 218 members of the House to it.
Now, let me ask you the same question, but from the opposite perspective. Democratic Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur indicated she may be willing to help Kevin McCarthy in a coalition vote, while another Democratic Congressman, Ro Khanna, indicated he may be willing to help another Republican become Speaker, but not Kevin McCarthy. So what are the chances of Democrats coming across the aisle to help a Republican win?
I don't think there's any chance of it at all. I mean, the only way I think Democrats would actually help somebody win other than Kevin, or even help Kevin win, is simply by not showing up for the vote. They finally get tired of the circus and they just don't come to the floor when a vote is called. And then the threshold required for Kevin McCarthy to become Speaker goes down. So let's say 40 Democrats get tired of the circus and they just don't show up to vote. The threshold now drops to 201 and Kevin McCarthy becomes Speaker of the House. I would see that as a more likely scenario them negotiate for an alternate candidate. I just don't see that happening.
And then from the opposite perspective, the Democratic leader, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, has received 212 votes on each and every ballot. So that makes him just 6 short. So is there a path for him to try to figure out a way to win over some Republicans to come across the aisle?
No, there's no path for Hakeem Jeffries at all. It's just not going to happen. And so it's nice to kind of fantasize about it and say, boy, if they did this or they did that, but you're not going to get 6 Republicans to move over to vote for a Democrat Speaker when the American people just gave Republicans a majority. Now, they might be regretting that they gave them a majority the way they're acting right now. And this is a prelude to how they're going to govern. So I think you've got some American citizens wondering if they made the right choice in November.
Well, former Congressman Reid Ribble of Wisconsin, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It's very good to be with you. Thank you.